Good afternoon. Welcome to a discussion about unleashing the power of education partnerships. I'm honored to be here this afternoon to introduce our panelist, Dr. Penny Schwinn, Education Commissioner of the state of Tennessee, Dr. Lavelle Brown, Superintendent of Ithaca City School District, Charlotte Lysor, Manager of Education Strategy and Insights at IBM, and Sam Whiting, Director of Boeing Global Engagement Western Region, the Boeing Company. We saw the McKinsey statistic showing that closing of the Black and Hispanic student achievement gap would add billions more to the US economy. Why is it so important to create strong partnerships between the business community and the education community? And we're sort of opening this up to anybody who wants to jump right in. Maybe Sam or Charlotte.
Sure, from the industry perspective, Cheryl, and thank you so much for having us here and having IBM as part of this conversation. Our current students are our future leaders, our future workforce, and as skills and talent needs are shifting at a pace that's completely unprecedented, we know more than ever that we need to support educators in really making sure and ensuring that there's alignment of the skills that students are going to need when they enter that workforce to not only, land a first job, but really be successful in their career.
Thanks for that.
If I could add to that, I also thank you for having me here today. I'm thrilled to be a part of it. I think, we really think about not just what we are doing as a company, but what our employees are doing and their interests and engagement in communities. And it's very important to us that we are thinking about the talent pipeline, both in terms of how we as a company can support education organizations and schools and all sorts of nonprofit organizations who are involved in this space, but also how our employees want to be engaged and how we can encourage them to be engaged in that as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I want to move to Dr. Schwinn and Dr. Brown. This last year obviously has been a challenge for every student, but there's no question that the shift to remote learning was a setback for students that are already vulnerable. We're already vulnerable. Dr. Brown, what steps are school systems taking to address learning recovery and to accelerate learning for traditionally underserved students? And then Dr. Schwinn, I want to hear about a tour that you've been on around the state of Tennessee and hear what you're learning and what insight you're gaining. So Dr. Brown?
Yes, thank you for the question, and it's an honor to be here. And I would say that the first and most important step is to understand that the traditionally underserved students and marginalized students were that way for a reason. Our schools have failed them previously. So we are looking to redesign our spaces to be much more inclusive and responsive. And to build something new in partnership with the young people who have been marginalized for generations. Our curriculum needs to change. Our young people need to see themselves in the curriculum. Our assessment models need to change, where young people see this as a performance assessment, a way for them to show their brilliance and their joy and their cultures and humanity. So our work needs to change. As we have all the right students. Our system has been what's been failing. So as we transition out of the pandemic, we're looking to change what we do.
That's fantastic. Dr. Schwinn?
Sure. So in Tennessee, last week, this week, and next week, I am on an Accelerating Tennessee 2021 bus tour. So I'm driving from Mountain City to Memphis and everything in between to visit over 50 districts in our state and look at what they're doing for summer programming, as well as how they're thinking about federal relief funding and what that means for next year. And, what we have is a state that is as diverse as the state of Tennessee in terms of ideas and investments. But across the board, what we are really focusing on is how do we make sure going into next year and how we're thinking about investments, we are targeting students who need the most support. We're thinking strategically about scale and sustainability. And we're also being very, very clear that a few core areas are how we really need to focus to make sure that we're going to see that long-term impact. And so I'll highlight our summer programming where we've got 15 to 20% of students in the state who are participating in that. We've got a massive tutoring program, and we're really focusing on literacy in all grade levels, but certainly in that early elementary space, because we know know, if students have those foundational skills mastered, we see much more acceleration when they get into those middle school and high school programs that allow them to have those meaningful partnerships, work-based learning, internships, et cetera, with our amazing partners in the state and industry. And the only other thing I would add is on the tour in each of the regions, we're meeting with industry partners, with higher education partners, and then with district officials to figure out how to create that vertical scaling so we're all moving in the same direction on behalf of creating clear pathways for all students.
I appreciate that. And you referenced sort of the pandemic relief funds, and, you know, talk a little bit about that and addressing sort of learning recovery. And then I'd love to circle back to Dr. Brown too and say, how is that going in your state as well in terms of how to use those massive amounts of dollars that are coming to states to really address the needs of students?
Yes, so in Tennessee, we're taking the approach that says we need to go very deep in a few core areas and incentivize and support districts on those areas where we are all focused. And so we've taken our strategic plan from before the pandemic, because I think to Dr. Brown's point, what we saw before has only been exacerbated now. And so we're focusing on academics, on student readiness, and on educators. So our core investments, we've got over $120 million on early literacy, really focusing there, an additional $25 million on math, $170 million on tutoring support, so high dosage tutoring for students across the state. And then really thinking about in that student readiness space, innovative high schools. We had $14 million set aside for that. We had to more than double that. We could not even fund a third of the applications that came in to really see how do we reinvent and rethink what high school is. And we've been, I can't say how much we've been encouraged by the amazing creative thinking across the state, but even just where does high school have to take place? We've funded applications where students will now do high school on industry sites, take their classes at industry, and then be able to move directly into workforce, or be able to take dual credit courses, do work-based learning or apprenticeships, and move directly into jobs while they're earning their college degree. So really just thinking about time, space, and place, and reinventing that. And then third is our Grow Your Own work, which we're very proud of. It should be free to become a teacher. We need to make sure we have excellent people in front of our kids every single day, so all kids have equitable access to amazing instruction, certified teachers, so that they are able to take advantage of the great innovative high schools and work that we have and partnerships we've formed.
Those are some wonderful best practices that I think we might like to share with other states. Dr. Brown, tell us a little bit about how it's going in your state in terms of those relief dollars.
Yeah, thank you. And some similarities, but some things that I would add. We are partnering with our communities. In our state, we are posting our plans on our websites, and we're receiving community feedback on how we intend to spend those very important dollars. And what we're hearing and what we're planning to do, yeah, we have some infrastructure needs. We've neglected our building infrastructure for far too long. And I think that was highlighted as we went into this pandemic as well. So we have some things to do to enhance our buildings, the physical plants, internally and externally. And we, again, not taking a deficit model about our young people needing to be fixed, but our system needed to be fixed as well, most importantly. And we're investing in a lot of professional development where our educators are doing a significant amount of identity work. It's important for our young people, our educators, to know who we are and how we have engineered these spaces with our biases and our blind spots. So that educator identity work takes time, and it takes some investment and resources to then lead to building out new systems and pedagogies, which is another aspect of the professional development work. So PD infrastructure is where we're starting to better serve our young people.
That's great. So both of you have sort of talked about maybe new opportunities or new educational opportunities for young people, particularly people of color. I want to switch to IBM and Boeing quickly. And how have your organization stepped up to support K-12 education among students who traditionally haven't had access opportunity, and especially in this critical moment?
Well, I guess, for us, we both had to face the reality of the educational organizations we were working with and the reality of our own employees in terms of how they were having to deal with suddenly being educators as well as working from home. We launched a program called Future You in April of 2019 that is a partnership with Discovery Education and is online free resources for educators. And we saw, once schools closed and educators were looking for online resources, we saw a huge uptake in it. And we also saw among our own employees their own desire to have the same kinds of resources and be able to share those with their families. So we have had really exponential growth in that program, and we are really working hard to create new content all the time. And we started with space, and then we did a whole environmental theme, and now we're doing all sorts of aviation content. And it's been a very exciting program to be able to lead, to be able to show the great, amazing people who work at Boeing and the work that they are doing and the kinds of facilities that we can't bring a student tour into, or even for that matter, an educator tour into because of the site restrictions, and to be able to show that, to be able to have that as an example of what's great about working at Boeing. And the other part, I think, for us that has been really true is just thinking about our own grant making to organizations and how we really needed to change that because of the changing realities of the organizations we are supporting. And so really having to think not just about 2019 grants we might have made that education organizations needed to repurpose, or actually any of the organizations we work with needed to repurpose, but also in terms of how we are engaging around what we had to do around pivoting with COVID and the airlift capabilities we put in place and the 3D printing of face shields and how we could turn that into educational content as well through our relationship through the STEM Careers Coalition with Discovery Education, and how our guidelines for grant making had to change, both in terms of the realities that COVID brought to bear, what we've talked about earlier in terms of the realities that now are just more stark, and how we really as a company have tried to address advancing racial equity in a much stronger way in terms of the language we use in our guidelines and in the ways in which we are supporting organizations.
Thank you for that, Sam. Charlotte, tell us about IBM.
Yeah, I think that just to reiterate, what so many folks have already said on this panel is that, at IBM, we were well aware, I think, of the structural inequalities that existed in the education system, that have been exacerbated by this pandemic and the recession. And in 2011, IBM actually founded a public-private partnership, a model called PTECH, which, to Commissioner Schwinn's point, is a very much an innovative high school model that brings together three historically siloed institutions, right? A high school, public high school partner, a community college partner in close proximity to that high school, and then an industry or industry partners. And so, founded in New York City in Crown Heights, Brooklyn in 2011, has since grown to 28 countries, 266 schools, with over 600 different industries, lots of industries supporting lots of schools. And, we're really proud of this work because of the opportunity that it does provide to underserved youth. Working mostly with Title I schools here in the US, PTECH is an open enrollment opportunity for students, no testing for admission, no cost for a post-secondary degree. Students are going to high school for 6 years where they're doing sort of an integrated curriculum of high school coursework and college coursework, all leading to an Associates of Applied Science, which has been, kind of given the thumbs up by industry in terms of alignment of skill needs and of workforce needs. And then on the industry side, they're providing a lot of workplace learning, work-based learning, CTE under many a name, but really, the opportunity for students not only to learn the technical skills that they're, potentially going to want to leverage in the workforce, but also those professional skills, the idea of goal setting, of communication, of collaboration, and really allowing, students to get practice in real time with real professionals. And the only thing I would add here is just the need for sustainability of these initiatives. Hopefully they will continue to kind of be part of the real fabric of public education moving forward. And that really calls for a need for funding for higher education, CTE, and dual enrollment.
How do you think about closing the sort of structural inequalities in education through a PTECH model? Do you specifically recruit certain students, or how does PTECH sort of get at this?
Yeah, PTECH certainly has a focus on historically underserved communities and seeks out communities, as I said, that really are Title I schools. The majority of our students are minority students in the US, and also, free reduced lunch. We're really trying to make sure that PTECH doesn't become kind of a specialized school model that becomes overly competitive and unfortunately then wouldn't maybe serve the students that we're trying to really give this opportunity to. And so, we're pretty strategic about our partnerships and about where we focus and what districts we work with.
Great, thank you for that. I want to just quickly ask a question about the issue of broadband. Sam, you talked about your partnership with Discovery Education, and certainly access to internet and to broadband is key to sort of students being able to access those programs. How do you, this is really for anybody, how do you expect we'll address these sort of inequities in terms of access, and how can the business community play a role in that?
Well, I'll start. One of the things that I think we have to be really careful about is now that schools are reopening and, most kids will be back in school in the fall, is not just saying, whew, we got through that. We don't have to worry about the broadband access that is super inequitable in this country as it is now. We do a lot of work with tribal nations and in rural areas and in urban communities, really trying to help push the issue of access through the conversations that we have with local elected officials or with local chambers or any of the organizations that we are a part of, because this is not an issue that, this isn't a new issue. This is a very long-standing issue, the issue of access to technology and to broadband that can help students just be able to do the work that they need to do, whether it's going to school from home or whether it's doing their homework. And I think as we think about, the partnerships that we can have through the U.S. Chamber or through organizations like Council for Strong America or the Alliance for Excellent Education, there are a lot of organizations that are working on this. We can't just, as a business community, say, oh, that's the mobile provider's problem. We all have to be a part of that solution.
Dr. Schwinn, Dr. Brown, how do you see the business community stepping up in your communities to help to address this, or how is this sort of playing out where you are?
Yeah, so I'm happy to jump in. I think that, for Tennessee's open for business, but so education is open for partnerships with business. So what we've seen is the majority of our districts are rural and certainly were significantly impacted by the pandemic, just like our urban districts were. And one of the things that we've seen to be so beneficial is we've got partnerships where, like T-Mobile, 200,000 families are now going to get access to free and low cost internet. We have an infrastructure conversation around those who don't have self-service, so the hotspots don't necessarily work. But one of the things and one of the reasons why we think that this conversation is so important and where business can come in is that the lessons learned from the pandemic show equity and access to rigorous content and opportunity. We need to be able to take the lessons learned and do things like our AP Access for All, our dual credit work, where students can take classes online in high school and get credit when those classes aren't offered at their local school systems. That can't happen if they don't have access to a device and to broadband. And so one of the things we can do is get businesses to come in, provide some of that, I think the human capital to teach the courses, have businesses come in to provide some financial support to create those pathways for students, but then also to help build out the infrastructure to create that access. And again, we've got tons of sustainable programs that we are working to implement, but that can only happen because of the great partnerships we have and that we are certainly looking to expand over the next 5 years.
And I would just add, this is a particular issue that needs some coordination. It needs to be a federal, statewide, or interstate approach. What I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is that everyone is taking a different approach to this. And what's happening is that those communities with privileges are much further ahead than those without, or those communities with voice are having opportunities and access that other communities are not. So I'm hoping that we coordinate our efforts, because this has been an ongoing conversation for the last 20 years I've been doing this work.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard people say, and I think this is to your point of bringing all stakeholders together, this is the moonshot issue, right? This is the thing that all stakeholders come together, and we need to get everyone connected. If this last year taught us anything. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to let Dr. Schwinn and Dr. Brown end us by telling us, we have an audience of business leaders and chambers and others that really are trying to address issues of inequality. What can the private sector do to help you where you are in your community with your schools? Dr. Brown, and then we'll go to Dr. Schwinn.
definitely want to give Dr. Sweeney the last word. I would just say we're one community, and we need to model best practices and initiatives for one another. As we diversify our staff, I would look to the business community to diversify their staff. As we diversify the leadership, I would look to the business community to have that as well. Our young people need to see themselves in those spaces being successful, just like we want to model that in our schools.
Thank you. Dr. Schwinn, close us out.
Yep. So I think what we are really looking for and hoping to have are businesses who are coming in and knowing that they are invited to come in and help co-create pathways. It cannot continue to be this domino handoff of students, because we know those students who are most disadvantaged and need the most support are not going to continue and persevere through that. We need to make sure that K-12, higher ed, and industry all come together and co-create pathways for children. All of our districts are looking for that support and help. And I think introducing and making sure that you are welcomed into those conversations and being really open about your willingness to participate, I think is going to help districts work in that co-creation model. And certainly we've got 147 who are open and ready for that level of collaboration.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And the U.S. Chamber will raise its hand to say we will support you in that work. Thank you all so much. Appreciate this conversation and all of you being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.